I grew up in an apartment building in the city. My family was low class, but we managed to get through our lives at a decent pace. My father, Stripes, worked as a taxi driver to pay the bills, while my mother, Gloria, worked in a carriage manufacturing company to afford the bare necessities. We were able to get by, and we had one another, which was enough for us. When I was 10, my father had passed away from pneumonia. It was one of the saddest times of my life. He was gone. All I had left was Jem and my mother, who was pregnant at the time with my little brother, Caps, who was born a few months later. At least he was able to bring some happiness back into the family. Years went by, and my mother had been working 19 hours, 6 days a week to get enough money for the rent and food. My sister graduated high school, but chose not to go to college in order to help care for Caps and myself. I gave my own contribution by giving him my own bed when he grew out of his crib. My sister wanted to give me hers, but I told her to keep it. I was just going to school while she worked at home and deserved to sleep comfortably. So, I slept on the living room couch. Years passed and I entered high school. Every day I was constantly bullied because I hadn't gotten my cutie mark. I didn't know what my special talent was, and I didn't have time to try and figure out what it was. My schedule was basically get up, go to school, get home, help my sister, eat, sleep, and repeat. Even the weekends were busy. Aside from hanging out with friends from time to time, I would always be helping my mother or sister at home. Half the time I didn't even think about what my purpose was, but I knew that fate had something in store for me, and whatever it was, I knew it was going to be great. So I ignored the insults and bullying over the years, and it got better over time. But nothing could prepare me for what was about to be thrown at me next. When I arrived home, I saw Jem trotting out the door with Caps, who was off to school that day. She looked worried and seemed to be in a hurry. I was about to ask where she was going, but after she saw me, she told Caps to go back inside the house. He did as he was told and left the two of us alone in the hallway. I asked where she was going, and she said she had to go to the hospital. This wasn't unusual. Jem often went to the hospital to pick up prescriptions from my mom, but she seemed much more concerned and worried than usual, so I asked her what was going on. She took a deep breath and told me that our mother was injured, badly injured. Everything in my mind just stopped. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know how to act. According to Jem, she was moving some interior materials for the carriages at the factory when some clumsy thickhead on the floor above knocked over a large stack of gears. She was under the gears and fell unconscious when they landed on her all at once. My legs were shaking and my mind sank. Jem could tell. She said that she was fine and that I had to watch Caps while she went to get her. So I did as she said and spent the whole day with my brother. He didn't even know what was going on. Jem probably didn't want to scare him, so she kept it to herself. Personally, I don't blame her. Caps was only 8 years old. How could he take in all of this? I couldn't even take in my father's passing when I was 10. I must have fallen asleep because when I opened my eyes, the lights were off. However, the kitchen light was still on. I sat up and saw my mother there holding a cup of water. She had a neck brace on and was in a wheelchair. None of that mattered to me. She was safe. She was home. I approached her, and after she noticed I was up, we hugged. I asked her if she was okay, and she said she was fine. I was glad for that, but she also said her injuries were so bad that she'd have to spend the rest of her life in that wheelchair. She wouldn't be able to work anymore. The accident broke her hind legs and her back, which rendered her unable to move or bend over. There was no way she could work in this condition. She was scared. Scared that she could not support her family or pay the bills. I stayed up with her the whole night, holding her in my hooves and keeping her calm as she cried.
Applejack was speechless. Never before had she met nor heard of a pony with such a rough past. Not even Princess Luna's exile to the moon by her own sister could compare to this. She could tell Thrash was having a hard time letting this out.
Thrash, that's terrible.
She said, rubbing his back with her hoof to calm him.
How did your family hold out?
Thrash pulled himself together and tried to remember what happened next.
Well, because of this, I was left with no other option. I decided to drop out of high school. My mother and sister told me not to, but I needed support my family like my father did. My sister now had to care for our injured mother and her little brother. There was no way she could hold a job on her own. So, it was up to me. I got a good job at a local pizzeria near the park. Every day I'd either be making pizzas or taking bits at the register. My employer was a unicorn whose name we could never pronounce, so we called him Pita for short. Not one of his favorite nicknames. I worked with his nephew, whose name I can't really recall. He was a nice stallion, about 5 years older than me. It was hard, but every Friday was worth it when I received my pay and brought it home to my family. Now that I think about it, if it wasn't for those two, I wouldn't have become what I am today.
What do you mean?
Every day they would have the radio playing in the restaurant. It was always tuned into the classic rock station. They had all the famous names, the Paris Sprites, Black Saddle, Spears and Roses. They had all the famous names. You name it, they had it. Whenever we were working or cleaning up, we would sing to the music they played. After hearing most of the songs they had to offer, I was always improving my singing skills. As the months went on, my voice was improving so much that I was able to sing anything. Pete's nephew said that my voice was unlike any other he had heard before. Of course, to be fair, Pete's nephew was a really good singer himself, and he gave me some pointers along the way.
Thrash stopped and looked at Applejack.
I learned parkour as well. I can't tell you how, but it's how I learned to do my, infamous stage stunts.
It's fine, just go on.
She said. She was really interested in the story, and was really happy to see that he was starting to return to his enthusiastic self again.
Well, after working there for almost a year, I was walking home on my usual route through the park. I had my paycheck and I was on top of the world. Along the way, I passed a lone Pegasus sitting on a bench entertaining a small audience of ponies. He had a guitar in his hooves and an empty top hat on the ground with a sign that read, "Strumming for Bits." I recognized the song he was playing from the radio, so I dropped a few bits in the hat and watched him perform. He was really good and clearly knew what he was doing. After he finished the song, he asked for requests. No pony said anything. In fact, most of the audience started leaving. So I gave him a song request. I can't remember what it was, but I heard it all the time in the pizza shop. He raised his guitar and started playing. The moment he strummed that first note, my mind was just begging me to sing to it. I took a deep breath and sang. He didn't seem to mind. He actually had a smile on his face after I started. One of the spectators that left actually came back after we began, and it started even attracting more visitors who were dropping even more bits into the hat. Once the song was over, we were applauded, unlike last time. I was about to leave, but he stopped me in my tracks and asked me to stay. At first I thought he saw me as a ticket to make more money, but then he acknowledged the crowd who also wanted me to continue. Seeing as I had nothing better to do that day, I decided to stay a while longer. He continued to play more classics while I sang along, and after a while we attracted a larger crowd. They loved my voice and his guitar playing so much that they started dancing and cheering each performance. After the sun set and the people left, I started talking with this guitarist. He asked me if I ever performed before since I really seemed to know what I was doing. Well, I told him I didn't, but he thought I should take advantage of my talent and use it to entertain. So, we decided to form our own musical duo. Little did I know I'd be working with this stranger for quite a while. This was the day I met Shredder. We continued performing in the park each day after I got out of work, and eventually we started getting paid to perform in restaurants and clubs around the city. Soon our names were starting to get out there and we were performing all over the place. We were commonly known for playing at Pete's restaurant. With the money we were making, I was finally able to get our family back on a steady track. Once our names were starting to become well known around the city, we eventually decided to form a band where we would write our own music to perform. After months of planning, several auditions, and the help of our friends, Blank Flank was formed. We started making our own music, and our gigs were getting bigger thanks to the help of my mother, who knew a lot of ponies in the city. She supported us very much and was proud of me for what I had accomplished with the band. And it wasn't long before we released our first album, Sickness for Rock. I remember the crowd cheering after we performed our biggest gig in the Philadelphia park that kicked off our first tour. As I stood with my friends on stage bowing to our fans, I realized that this was it. I always knew that fate had something great in store for me, and this was it! I made some new friends, found a career that's all about entertaining people, and helped my family get back on track. I knew this because this was the day I got my cutie mark.
What did it look like?
Applejack asked with a smile.
I made a promise to myself never to show it off. I wanted to live up to the band's name. The only ponies that have seen it are my family. The band doesn't even know what it looks like.
Applejack thought it was a bit strange at first, but it was his choice, so why should she argue with that?
Well, at least everything turned out well in the end.
Honestly, I wish it did.
Thrash sighed, his smile turning to a frown. He looked again at his bracelets.
But there's more to tell. About a year ago, we were preparing to finish the needed recordings for the Radiation album. It was a rainy night, 1 a.m. in the morning, and I was at the studio practicing with Rush and Slide after the other members left. I was about to record the vocals for the track when I was interrupted by a phone call. It was Jem, and she was crying. She was in the hospital. According to Jem, my mother was dropped off by a friend after she got herself checked out at the doctor's. While she was approaching the front gate, there was a small group of fans that were checking out the home I lived at, which is common for me. The moment they saw my mother open the gate to let herself in, they took notice and ran towards her, attempting to get in through the gate. She didn't even see them coming until she was hit on the other side. As she tried to close the gate, the fans just tried to push the gate open. She was hit by the gate, knocked out of her wheelchair, and fell back first onto the ground where the fans paid her no mind as she was trampled. Because they were fans of my work. My sister was there with her own friends, and they were able to call for help and have them taken in. My mother was rushed to the hospital. I galloped out of the recording studio and made my way towards the hospital as fast as I could. I arrived to see Shredder and Whiplash waiting with my sister and brother outside of her room. The expressions on their faces. I'll never forget the sadness in my siblings' eyes. I didn't think it was anything serious, but Shredder told me that her condition was crucial and that she wouldn't be with us for much longer. I entered her room, and she looked at me with a smile. I stood next to her bedside. I apologized to her and said I had no idea anything like this would... But she stopped me and said it was okay. She said it was her time to go. I was in tears, but she told me not to grieve. I never forgot this moment. The last thing she ever said to me.
Words cannot describe how much I am proud of you. When I held you after you were born, I never would have thought that this sweet, sweet colt of mine would go as far to do something so big that would make people happy. If your father was still with us, there is no doubt that he would feel the same way. I'll be sure to tell him everything when I see him again. Keep your brother and sister safe, and never forget, no matter where I am, I will always love you.
The last thing I said to her was, I love you too, as I held her hoof in mine. And then she left.
Thrash held back his tears as best he could. He held up his foreleg, and the bracelets glistened in the moonlight.
My parents exchanged these bracelets when they were married. I wear them all the time like my mother did. We wrote a new addition to the Radiation album entitled Sweet Colt of Mine. It was written in her memory. This was also when we had to start wearing disguises, to protect ourselves and any pony around us from getting hurt.
He wiped a tear from his eye. Applejack felt bad. It wasn't the fact that he lost his family, but more of how he witnessed the passing of a loved one before his very eyes, because of something that was caused by his own fame. She couldn't even imagine the pain.
I'm so sorry, Thrash. I didn't mean to open old wounds or nothing.
You don't have to be. You didn't know. I just always remember her and how I made her smile with my music. I remember whenever she came to a concert, I'd see her in front of the crowd smiling as we performed. But now she's gone, and it's because of me.
She put a hoof on his shoulder.
I can't imagine the pain you went through, but I can kind of relate. You see, my parents were traveling sales ponies. They traveled to exotic places to sell and collect foreign fruits. But after they had apple bloom, they went out and we never saw them since. It doesn't bug me as much, though. I know they're out there somewhere. But I remember something that they always told me. Follow your heart and be who you are. You're a kind-hearted stallion, Thrash. Everyone knows it. Not just your fans or the band, but even your parents know this. Your mother's death wasn't caused by you. It was just a bunch of uncaring, cold-hearted fools. You had no real involvement.
He looked at her.
Never change who you are.
Thanks, Applejack.
Thrash's taxi flew down and parked itself by the bridge.
Well, this is my ride.
Thrash said as he made his way towards the cart. He then stopped and looked back at her.
Hey, the Cloudsdale concert is tomorrow, so I was thinking, well, after my rehearsal, if you're not busy, do you want to grab some lunch or something?
She smiled at him. He could tell what her answer was off the bat.
Meet me here tomorrow around the same time as today? I know the perfect place.
He nodded and proceeded into the chariot. Applejack watched him as he took off. She knew that she needed to cancel out on her brother again, but it was only going to be for lunch. So how long could it be? She started her way back home. Shredder was strumming his guitar on the couch behind Slide, who was busy playing a card game with Snap.
I'm telling you, I can't take it anymore. Whenever I go to that boutique, that unicorn is always getting in my personal space.
How can you blame her? You said she told you how much she admired you as a teenager. Besides, why keep going if she's so crazy for you?
You know me, I need to finish something when I start it. Cows my obedience to myself.
Shredder and Snap looked at each other. What in Celestia's name are you talking about?
Whiplash keeps making me go with hell.
Snap sighed to himself. You're hopeless, mate. You're hopeless. Thrash then came in and trotted towards his bedroom.
Long day today, monsieur?
Slide asked. Thrash turned to see every pony looking at him.
In a way, yes. I did a lot of walking.
He responded.
No odd feelings about what I said this morning, right?
Yeah, I knew you were only fooling all along. What's wrong with your eyes? Huh?
They look sore. Thrash didn't realize until now that the tears had caused his eyes to turn a pinkish color. Still, he came out with the truth.
I had a moment today.
He said, shaking his hoof with the bracelets. They got the message and didn't want to ask any more questions about it. They only wanted to help him through his misery. Well, we're about to deal a new game. You want in?
Sure, why not?
He trotted up and sat down at the table with his friends. Snap shuffled the deck as Shredder continued playing.
Thank you so much for your patience and have a fantastic day.